But what I don't want to do is start going back into Kyle Shanahan versus Jim Harbaugh. Harbaugh's in Michigan in Ann Arbor. He hasn't been the head coach of the 49ers since 2014. Let's appreciate the great times he helped provide us. Not how, hey, he inherited this, inherited that, blah, blah. The fact is, not any coach can step into that situation and make this team winners and make them believe. When you have a losing culture like the 49ers did, Harbaugh gets credit for turning it around. Shanahan deserves his extension. He gets credit, him and John Lynch, for turning this program around the way Harbaugh did in the early 2010s, 11s, 12s, 13s. So I don't want to start comparing Shanahan and Harbaugh. Who would you rather have? They both were damn good coaches.
Well, I look at Shanahan and I say to myself, like, in terms of a startup, because that's what this was. This was a complete tear-down startup, right? Like, there was nothing. He built the foundation. He
did.
Really did a great job. Now, they had DeForest Buckner already in tow. That was his rookie year. And Armstead and Jimmy Ward and a couple of guys. But none of those guys were any good because they were in the wrong schemes and coaches couldn't find them. He not only created an unbelievable staff that everyone has been poached or is poaching over the last couple of years, but he's also built this roster and evolved the roster over time. So they've done a great job, and they've had misses. Everybody has misses, but they've done a great job reloading this team. And I look up, and what do they have? 7 years in, 8 years in? Is this
7? This is year 7.
It's year 7. And this is the deepest, best version of the team, in my estimation, that they've ever had.
It's debatable whether or not they have the better defense, because 2019 was a special defense, 2021 was a good defense during this run. But I'm just looking at this year and what they built
it feels
and the way they have
good.
stacked. This probably is the most balanced team they've had since they've been here in San Francisco. And the offense, since training camp, I believe this offense could be the best offense the 49ers have had, top to bottom, since maybe 1998. That's how good this offense looks. That's how good this offense can play. They scored 30 against the New York Giants, and a lot of people would admit that, boy, they struggled.
Well, and I think the thing that when you look at like how they've built this team, I think it's important to kind of break this down. We make a big deal about the Golden State Warriors and their ability to draft, right? And develop and then sign their own, right? They get a lot of credit for that. They've also made some shrewd acquisitions over the years. Andre Iguodala and Kevin Durant and now CP3. And there's a lot that goes into it. We look at the Giants. We're like, they can't hit on free agents. And I keep saying free agency is one avenue to build a team. The Niners have signed free agents, whether it's Richard Sherman, right? They've made unbelievable draft day decisions, whether it's Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk or Nick Bosa.
Trey Lance.
Trey Lance is not a great one.
Right.
But they've also made unbelievable trades. And I think that's the part, for me, they've blended team building almost to perfection. Because I look at their roster currently, you've got a Dre Greenlaw and a Brock Purdy and a George Kittle, guys that were found late in the draft. You got a middle round guy in Fred Warner. You got top end guys in Deebo and Nick Bosa.
What about Hufanga, 6th-round pick?
Amazing. And then you got guys like Trent Williams, who you traded for, and Christian McCaffrey, who you traded for. Then you have unbelievable free agent signings like Javon Hargrave and Charvarius Ward. They have really built this team in a perfect blend of all the ways to assemble a roster.
And remaining patient with their draft picks.
That's a good point.
A lot of people thought Banks was a bust just because he didn't play in his first year. He was a second-round pick. It's like, really good second-round pick. And then he plays last year. And nobody's discussing whether he was drafted too early or too late, or whether or not he was a bust. And you look at the way he started his season. He looks like a left guard for the 49ers for the next 10 years. He looks like a staple. Finding offensive linemen that nobody knows about, right? Jake Brendel. We don't talk about him enough.
Out of nowhere.
They signed Weston Richburg thinking they needed a center. Didn't work out. He got hurt. They paid him a lot of money. You get Jake Brendel. Nobody's talking about Jake Brendel anymore. Everybody's happy with Jake Brendel right now. You identify talent on the offensive line, defensive line. Okay, who are we going to pay? Who are we going to extend? Well, they extend Eric Armstead, and a lot of people were out on Eric Armstead, including myself. A lot of people didn't think, Eric Armstead was worth that, was worth those dollars, especially after you trade DeForest Buckner. Well, Eric Armstead, you look up and you say, boy, he's been here a decade.
I know.
He's been a stable force inside that with that defensive line, in the middle of that defensive line. So look, John Lynch has done a good job. Shanahan has done a good job, and if Shanahan finishes this extension through 2028, he'll be at 195 games coached, excluding the playoffs. That will top Bill Walsh. He'll be the guy here in San Francisco, and he has a chance to be that guy here in San Francisco if he can win a couple Lombardis.
And I think what made Bill Walsh such a revered coach is the legacy, the Bill Walsh tree. I mean, look at Kyle Shanahan's tree right now. DeMeco Ryans wins a huge game that no one thought he was going to win with the Houston Texans yesterday. And essentially an upstart expansion franchise in the Houston Texans. They have no players anyone would want, right? Mike McDaniel, how's he looking for Miami?
Looking damn good.
Right? Robert Saleh, I know he's with the Jets, but like
they've both done the quarterback, but overall they have a really good roster.
They're better today than when they acquired
According to Yogi, they have a better defense than the Niners.
Right.
But that speaks to the Jets and their talent on that defense.
And so his legacy is going to be, very, very rich, and it's going to keep growing and keep getting bigger. The other element that I don't think we've addressed at all with the Niners for the Shanahan era, when you have 60 guys on a team and a bunch of staff members, the law of averages tells you you're going to have some incidents.
Right.
Like, look at society, right? Even if you've got a huge family, one or two of your family members is going to get into trouble at some point with the law, accidentally, on purpose. Maybe they're just not a good person, whatever. There was a string of things that embarrassed the team and the fan base when it came to the 49ers, whether it was Ray McDonald, whether it was the Alden Smith situation.
Bruce
some were
Miller.
personal, some were criminal. Like, there was a lot of different stuff going on. Chris Culliver said some things. They had a Reuben Foster situation early on, and people were going, oh, here we go again. Now, look, Charles Omenihu had his own issues, which the legal system is trying to work out off to the side. But for the most part, they've brought in guys that are pretty damn good people.
Well, character guys. Yeah. High character guys.
I don't think we talk enough about that.
No, it's a good point. And, there's been times where you think the locker room's been tested because you lose the locker room.
Yes.
I think the Jimmy Garoppolo situation with Trey Lance, that could have lost the locker room. Even this year, could have lost the locker room. The way they started slowly could have lost the locker room. It didn't. And the Reuben Foster situation is interesting because it was a chance. They did take a chance on a guy who had a questionable character at Alabama. Okay, they get through the year. He's hurt. They come back the second year. He has his incident. He comes back. And then Tampa Bay happens on Saturday night where you bring, we know what happened. I don't want to revisit it. But they cut bait right away. Say, you know what? We don't care if he's a first-round pick. Let's just move on.
Yes.
We'll move on. And Reuben Foster hasn't been heard from since.
No.
So they do get credit for that, identifying good locker room guys who fit the culture, who fit the style, who fit this brand. And that's a credit to Jed York for empowering John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan to run this bad boy, and for them to go to the drafts and go to these meetings and interview these young men and bring them into the locker room and say, you know what? They fit our style.
When I look at the best run teams in sports right now, right, they are that sport first, and that's what they're defined by, right? Well, the Warriors, right? They've been those guys, Draymond and Clay and Steph. For all the stuff we get frustrated with on Draymond on the podcast, basketball is his bread and butter.
Right.
He truly cares about his legacy and imprinting the game of basketball first and foremost. I look at like the Houston Astros, like they're about baseball. I know we got the cheating and all that stuff, but those guys are all about Bregman and Altuve. Baseball first, baseball first. I look at Patrick Mahomes. What's the most important thing to Patrick Mahomes? Football first. Debo, Bosa, Ayuk, Trent Williams, McKittle, McCaffrey. Football first. Football first. I just don't think we can appreciate enough how the character, high level of character, these guys that they've brought in have been.
And they got rewarded for it. And they get rewarded for it. And they deserve these extensions. Now, it came out of nowhere. Some fans may say, well, why don't you wait until they win the Super Bowl? Why don't you wait until because what does Fat Joe say? Yesterday's price ain't today's price.
No.
So you never know how much the price tag will go off for the Shanahans and Lynches. But what Jed York learned from, and he gets credit for this, as an owner, the Harbaugh situation probably taught him a huge lesson. I went with Trent Baalke. I sided with the GM. Didn't work out. I didn't extend Harbaugh, who was crying for the extension. Kind of wore me out. But I think he learned from that, saying, you know what? I'm going to get the next coach I get. And he figured out quickly, moving off of Jim Tomsula and Chip Kelly quickly, how many teams we see will keep a coach around or keep a quarterback around. He said, you know what? I got to move on right now. I know I got to pay these guys, but I got to move on. It's not going to work out long term. Finally got my guy. He's a football lifer. Kyle Shanahan is a football coach first. He's a football lifer. He was born into this. It's a family business, the Shanahan family business, coaching in the NFL, coaching football. This guy's going to be around a long time. The fan base likes him. He fits our culture. John Lynch fits our culture, went to Stanford, has been drafting really well. I got a great, stable organization, great construction here, roster construction. These guys know what they're doing. Let's just keep them around for a long time. And as long as they're around, the 49ers are going to be relevant. And that's important in today's game.
How many GM head coach combos are simultaneously getting extensions?
Not many.
After whiffing on the number 3 overall pick.
Not many. Well, you know why?
When it comes to quarterback.
You whiffed on the number 3 pick. You're not even blinking.
It's
it's
kind of the most improbable.
Right.
Like, say the sentence out loud. I don't think there's any other GM head coach combo in the history of the NFL that survives what they just went through.
No, they don't. Well,
and gets an extension?
Well, because of Brock Purdy. Because of Brock. And you may have gotten lucky with Brock Purdy.
Hey, who cares?
Who cares?
Yeah.
You got Brock Purdy, and now he's helping. And now you're in a position, too, to where the quarterback's not getting paid much. And if things don't work out with Brock Purdy, well, you're going to be in the business for another quarterback. And you know what? You have an attractive destination. That's the other thing. The 49ers have become a free agent destination for a lot of teams, for a lot of players, I should say, just like the Golden State Warriors. Now, the Warriors kind of lost their locker room last year. They're trying to gain that back. They're trying to get that culture back. And everything I'm hearing about the culture, it's all good. Chris Paul, it's going to be all good with Stephen Curry. We'll get to Dwight Howard, or whether or not they should have signed Dwight Howard. We'll get to that in the 9 o'clock hour. But they're getting their culture back. And you look at the Giants' culture. It's an absolute mess right now. When we talk extensions, and Farhan and Kapler, their culture is a mess. A mess.
They would die to have the consistency that the Niners have.
No doubt.
The star power that the Niners have. The synergy from front office all the way down to the field, right?
Yep.
I mean, you were talking about getting lucky. Do you know who Ben Hogan is? Golfer?
Yeah, of course. Ben Hogan is one of the greats.
Yeah, so he had a line about luck. The harder I practice, the luckier I seem to get. And I love that line. And I look at like the Shanahan Lynch thing. And look, luck is a factor. I am not denying it. Finding Brock Purdy, we could explain a million different ways on why and how they got lucky to do it.
Right.
But they made the most of it. They could have easily handed the team back to Trey Lance or brought back Jimmy Garoppolo. Right. They could have mishandled it from the second that they found that Brock Purdy was a player. They get credit for handling it the way that they did. So you could say, hey, you got lucky that 2 point guards were drafted ahead of Steph Curry. Yeah, but then once we got Steph Curry, we made the most of it.
Right.
Once they got Brock Purdy, they've made the most of it.
No doubt. Let's go to Nick in Berkeley. Nick, what's happening? You're on the roast.
Hey, good morning, y'all. I think the biggest difference between Harbaugh and Shanahan is a lot of the little sniping in the press. You know what I'm saying? Because Harbaugh's like, he's like a big child sometimes, man, with the stuff he says, man, he's out of control. He can't help himself. And with Shanahan, I think he just diagrams plays better, man. Trent Baalke was a hot mess, though. I mean, if Harbaugh had Lynch, man, I don't even know what he would have done. But, he has all that conflict with the owners, and you can't be doing that, man. You be a professional about it. You know what I mean?
Well,
Niners team right now, man, like the Giants, wish they was on our level. The Cowboys wish they was on our level. Minnesota wish they was on our level, man. It's only a couple teams that are even on our level, man. That's the world champions, and we'll be in Philly, and we'll be right there with them, man. We're about to let them have it, man. I'm telling you, just our year, man. 15-2, straight to the moon.
You know what? And that's what yesterday was about. And I'm glad Nick can kind of led me into the next thing I want to get into, and we'll get to Rob San Bruno in just a second here, because I know he has thoughts on the extensions. They're coming off a game in which they held the New York Giants to 150 total yards. I don't think that's happened for the 49ers since the 90s. Actually, excuse me. That happened once in, I think, 2019. They held the team to 100. But think about that.
Was that the rain game against Washington?
Maybe that game.
Yeah, the tsunami game.
150 yards. So you got this defense that you built. And then you're able to bring in a Javon Hargrave all the way from Philadelphia, who's played his entire career on the East Coast, bring him all the way out to the West Coast, say, hey, come play for us. Because you got a great D-line coach, Chris Kosirk. You had a great structure in your defense and a great structure with this organization. You look at the offense. Deebo Samuel, look at him, how he's grown. Homegrown players.
Yeah.
And they've taken care of homegrown players. And people notice that around the league. Andrew Bagley in The Athletic brought up, he had an article about the Giants and whether or not they're going to be able to attract free agents because of the style of play. When you look at the style of play with the 49ers, they're able to attract free agents. The Warriors have been able to attract free agents.
Did it matter for Hargrave and for Charvarius Ward about state taxes?
No.
Did it matter about the community being in despair? Because there are parts of the Bay that are in despair. Right. No one would dismiss that.
Did not matter.
No.
Did not matter because
they want
of
to
the
be
head
a part
coach.
of something special.
Exactly. And this team has something special brewing here with the 49ers. They're really, when you look around the league yesterday, And I'm looking at all these teams, the Chicagos, the Washingtons, the New York teams, and the Giants and the Jets. The Patriots right now, who are not a good football
Even
team.
Tennessee,
it's Ryan Tannehill's awful.
I actually really like their coach, but like their roster's not that great.
Not good. And they traded A.J. Brown for a bag of peanuts. All right? The Las Vegas Raiders.
Tough to watch.
Arizona.
Tough to watch.
The Saints.
Tough to watch.
Falcons.
Tough to watch.
And Falcons are, but Desmond Ridder can't throw a downfield pass.
Something's off.
He can't throw a downfield pass or line for another quarterback. The Denver Broncos.
I'm warming up to them. Broncos are terrible. They might go, honest to God, they might go over with Russ.
Minnesota.
Tough to watch.
Minnesota.
Well, so Minnesota's
the Chargers.
Minnesota's a good example. When I think of like Trent Baalke, what did him in? Not filling the cupboard back up with players who are helpful, whether that's via free agency trades or to the draft. I look at the Niners, and like we haven't even seen the young safety, but in the preseason,
Jair Brown,
he looked very promising.
He looks like a player,
right? And like we look at the running backs and the situation they've got. Like Chris McCaffrey's a superstar. They've got a couple other running backs who are solid, like who could come in. Ronnie Bell, late draft pick. Okay, now he's not of the level of Debo and Brandon Ayuk, but for one game, did you miss him?
No.
Not that much. He did a really good job. So they've
you did miss him early on. This offense was a bit constipated. I want to let's be real.
Still put up almost 500 yards.
Yeah, you did, but it happened later. But you did miss Brandon Ayuk.
My point being is that how many teams could put in a 7th-round receiver and get certain production, like some production? They've replenished to a degree the entire team, and I think about Trent Baalke a lot of what did him in, and it was not replenishing all these draft picks. So as you announced the suspension, extensions for Shanahan and Lynch, the only thing I worry about, will you lose someone who I think is the most important person in the building?
Adam Peters?
Yeah.
How important is Adam Peters?
I mean, he seems to really have a big feel on these late picks, and they really hit on these late picks.
They do.
I mean, look, we could have an argument.
Does Adam Peters want to leave?
Is Colton McKivitz any good? I don't know. But he is starting for them.
He is starting.
And he was a late draft pick, found out of nowhere.
I wonder how much pull Adam Peters has.
I mean, they talk about him a lot.
They do talk about him a lot, but they lost
really
Rand Carthon to the Tennessee Titans, and a lot of people said, boy, they lost him. Just like the D coordinators.
Yeah.
We've thought, boy, they're going to miss Robert Saleh. Boy, they're going to miss D'Amico Ryans.
Well,
Steve Wilkes has stepped right in.
He looks good.
And they haven't skipped a beat.
But
Mike McDaniel, same thing. Baldy came out, I was like, boy, they're going to miss Mike McDaniel, right?
Yeah.
Well, do they miss Mike McDaniel? The Niners are dropping 30.
Kyle was the head coach, and Kyle is the play caller.
Exactly.
Right?
That's what I thought.
But I'm looking at player personnel, and we would all agree, like, it's very important. Like, I look at, you talk about all these teams. Personnel is where a lot of these teams fall short. Now, we could argue about coaching and whether they're any good.
Personnel does matter, but also
a lot.
Personnel matters, and the Vikings have no personnel, but also coaching does matter.
No doubt. They go hand in hand.
They go hand in hand.
To me, they go hand in hand.
Like I'm looking at Brandon Staley and the Chargers. The Chargers have a damn good quarterback in Justin Herbert. Right? I'm not the biggest Justin Herbert fan, but he's a good quarterback.
They've got great personnel.
I wouldn't take 10 quarterbacks over Justin Herbert. I'll say that on the front end. And I know I've been harsh on Justin Herbert.
Yeah, you just don't think he's like top 4.
Yeah, don't put him in a category with Mahomes and Josh Allen.
No, he's not even there yet. No,
but you look at their coach, and I'm saying, boy, they got all that personnel.
And
a good roster.
Can't do anything.
A very good roster.
Yeah.
Whoever the GM down there with the Chargers is.
Tom Kolesko?
Is it Kolesko? He put together a great roster.
I think it's Tom Kolesko.
Put together a great roster. And then you get Brandon Staley. And you get the coaching that just holds you back.
100%. They can't get a stop.
Can't get a stop to save their life. And then they make dumb decisions on 4th down.
Yeah, Elite D personnel, excuse me. No, it's a great point. And so I guess what I'm saying is that I'm wondering out loud, will Lynch get a different title to elevate Adam Peters to keep him in the building?
They've done that before, right?
I'm hoping that they continue to do it. You know how it is. Like at certain companies, they give you certain stocks that vest after X amount of years, or they give you a particular money that vests after so much time. Vest this guy out and give him a title to where he's not looking elsewhere. I want to keep this core together because Peters, Lynch, Shanahan, Parag, I'll throw in there, Jed York, they're making sweet music together. Why do I want to upset the apple cart?